Good afternoon. Welcome to meeting 109 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Public Accounts.
In a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application, including today's witness. A reminder that all comments should be addressed to the chair. Conformément à l'article 108.3G du règlement.
Pursuant to Standing Order 1083G, the committee is resuming its study of Report 1, ArriveCan, referred to committee on Monday, February the 12th, 2024.
Welcome our witness, David Yeo, business owner, who's joining us, as I said, by video conference. Mr. Yeo, I appreciate you making yourself available to us today. And as discussed with the clerk, you have an opening statement of up to 5 minutes, please. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to you if you'd like to speak to us for up to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I hope everybody can hear me fine.
Yes, we can.
I would like to start off by saying thank you, Mr. Chair and honorable members of the committee. This land that we gather on today is a traditional, ancestral, and ceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation and is now home to many other First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. I'm a descendant of Treaty Signing Chief Robert Franklin, who is my great-grandfather and has past Chief of Alderville First Nation. He was also a World War I veteran. I hold Alderville First Nations community near and dear to my heart, as this what forms my Indigenous ancestry. I have family that live there, and my father is also buried there next to my great-grandfather. I too am an Indigenous veteran who served with the Canadian Army for 14 years from 1987 to 2001. Following this, I joined the Canadian Armed Forces Reserves for another 10 years from 2001 to 2011. From September 1991 to February of 1992, I was deployed to Cyprus as a part of a UN mission with the 2nd Battalion Royal Canadian Regiment. I was a C9 machine gunner and driver along the front lines for 6 months. From August till November 2010, I was deployed in Afghanistan as a contractor for the Department of National Defense to deliver a high assurance security capability to Kandahar. We also went outside the wire to all of the forward operating bases as well. I received a commander's commendation for my contribution to Task Force Kandahar. I'm a tactical security specialist with expertise and certifications in high assurance guarding technologies for the Canadian Armed Forces, both on mobile platforms and security areas within the CAF, or specialty areas within the CAF. In 2002, I founded Dalian Enterprises, a hardware, software, cybersecurity company, and the Government of Canada is Dalian's primary customer. In 2002 until September of 2023, I was not an employee of the Canadian government in any capacity, but a contractor providing IT professional services through Dalian to the Department of National Defense. Since 2002, Dalian has been regularly audited by Indigenous Services Canada to confirm compliance with all requirements with the procurement strategy for Indigenous business, and the company has passed every one of them, including one just recently in February 2024. The PSIB is designed to help Indigenous entrepreneurs like me start and grow a business by providing them access to procurement opportunities within the Government of Canada, either directly or through partnership. The PSIB has been successful in helping many Indigenous-owned companies, including Dalian, to launch, grow, and prosper. In late September 2023, long after the completion of all work on ArriveCan by Dalian, my professional relationship changed with the Department of National Defense. It changed from that of a consultant providing IT professional security services to a public service employee with the PIPSI union. That happened on the 19th of September, 2023. So I'll say that again, 19th of September, 2023. Due to this change, I took steps to address any conflict of interest concerns by entering into a confidentiality, non-disclosure, no access agreement with Dalian, in which I agreed to refrain from participating in any Dalian proposals, projects, contracts, ventures, or any other activity relating directly or indirectly to the National Defense Department. Since becoming a public service employee of National Defense, I've honored that agreement, have not been involved in any management of our operations at Dalian, and have not had access to Dalian confidential information of any kind. I also made appropriate conflict of interest filings with the National Defense Department resigned as director and officer of Dalian, and put my Dalian shares into a blind trust. Unfortunately, no one from the media ever contacted Dalian Dalian or I before publishing reports late in February. They suggested that I was a public service employee for decades. This resulted in an unfounded allegation at D&D and unfounded allegation at D&D that I was in conflict of interest. I understand that D&D has now made a statement that there was no conflict of interest, but I have already made the choice and resigned from the public service after just 168 days, mostly due to all of this very difficult situation. So even more disappointingly, no one from the federal government has ever contacted Dalian or myself before undertaking the unprofound action of terminating all contracts with Dalian, hardware and software, and professional services, suspending security clearances, suspending Dalian and Craddox from continuing current work and competing for future opportunities with the Government of Canada, their primary customer for 22 years and 29 years respectively. This all happened within 48 hours without due diligence, or in our concept, due process. There's not been a single review, investigation, or audit, report, or study that has indicated Dalian or Craddox did anything wrong or illegal during ArriveCan or the ArriveCan project or any other government project that we've been involved with. Despite this, and as a result of these unfounded terminations and suspensions, hundreds of employees and consultants are already out of work, or soon will be, from both companies. Neither company has done nothing wrong or different for the past 2 and 3 decades of working with the federal government. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. That went a little over time. People might recognize, but I did want to give you an opportunity to just get your words on the record. Turning now to our first round, we have Mr. Barrett. You have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
On what date did you start your employment with the Government of Canada?
Mr. Chair, the Government of Canada start date was the 19th of September, 2023.
Okay, I'll circle back to that. On what date were you first employed in any capacity with the Government of Canada, including in the Canadian Armed Forces?
That would be start date of December 17th, 1987.
Have you been employed by any other departments other than as a regular reserve member of the Canadian Armed Forces and the Department of National Defence?
So the short answer is no, but I'm assuming that you're talking about my consulting work.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
You mentioned the date of September 19th, 2023. That was the date that you said what happened?
That was the date that I started as a public service employee.
And did anything else happen on that date that's noteworthy for the work of this committee?
Not that I'm aware of. No.
So we have in the documents that the committee has received, it says that that the department signed a contract with you on that very same date. So I find that interesting that on September 19th of 2023, you were both awarded a contract and awarded a job in the public service. Does Dalian have contracts that are current with the Government of Canada?
Not currently, no, because they were all terminated.
So the number is 0.
Number is 0.
Are you able to, is Dalian able to fully do business with the Government of Canada or bid on work?
No, we are not. We have been suspended from all security clearances, obviously pending this discussion and other discussions ongoing, and all of our contracts have been terminated. So by virtue of that, there is no ability to execute. Yeah.
How many subcontractors do you have?
That is a really good question. From a professional services standpoint, I would actually have to get back to you on that. From a hardware and software perspective, we have 4 or 5 that we use. Yeah.
Sir, if you're going to get back to us with the number, can you also provide the committee with the names of those subcontractors?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Sure. Yeah.
if you'd note that for us, please, Chair.
Noted.
Was GC Strategies ever a subcontractor of Dalian?
Again, I spend, a large portion of my time, or I spent a large portion of my time with the Defense Department, whether it was my 168 days as a public servant, or whether it was, my consulting time at the department. So, to answer your question, the obvious answer is yes, but the aspect of them, working with us, I'd have to get more detail for you. Yep.
So you can provide us with the when and on which contracts?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So we know, of course, that they were, and I appreciate you indicating even a tertiary awareness of it. But they were caught not following security requirements for government contracts. For all of your contracts with the government, knowing that GC Strategies did not meet security requirements, are you able to guarantee the security of all of the contracted work done that you have done with the Government of Canada?
Again, the short answer would be yes, because we are, ISO certified in our processes. But a large part of this happens to be with as a prime contractor with the federal government, whether it's, an Aboriginal set-aside contract or not, because we've had both in the past. But I would say that, in retrospect to that, if they have some kind of misgivings on their security clearances, that would be tracked through, and we should have awareness of that at our own security shop. So I've never been told of any, issues with the security clearance side of things with GC. And again, I've just been, read into this file over the last number of months, and it hasn't come up as an issue.
So are you aware of the reports that I'm referring to, that GC Strategies did not follow the security requirements for contracts with the Government of Canada? Is that something that you've been aware of prior to my speaking of it with you just now?
No, it isn't. You'd have to give me more details on the actual security requirements that were actually, not followed, because I'm not aware of any that they didn't.
Have you or your partner at Dalian ever provided any hospitality to any Government of Canada employees?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Have you or your partner at Dalian ever met with government employees outside of government offices?
I know I have not. And I can say that this is not something that is even remotely looked at from, an internal perspective. But as far as I'm aware, no.
Did you ever meet with Christian Firth of GC Strategies?
I have not met Christian once. No.
Have you ever spoken to him?
No.
Have you ever spoken to his partner?
No.
Has your partner ever spoken to Mr. Firth or his partner?
I would assume yes to that question.
Okay.
Because obviously there was a subcontract that was put together for CBSA for this effort. So I would imagine that there would have been dialogue that would have had to have happened. Yeah.
Is Dalian registered anywhere outside of Canada?
No.
Okay, my last question is, you stated previously that you are constantly audited to ensure that you're eligible for the Indigenous set-aside when winning bids as a joint venture with Caradix. Who is conducting these audits, and when was the last audit done?
Sure. So the audits are done by ISC, which is Indigenous Services Canada. And the last one that was done in February 2024, just a few weeks ago. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barrett. Next up, we have Mr. Chen. You have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
Chair, Mr. Yeo, my first question to you is, how many years has Dalian been working on federal contracts?
So, Mr. Chair, I appreciate the question. I started the company in 2001, 2002, and we won our first contract within the first year. So shortly after that.
And could you describe the nature of your contributions to the ArriveCan application?
So again, I'm very much 2 gates deep at D&D in what I do or what I did at the department before I had to resign after 168 days. But the upshot is that when it comes to ArriveCan, and I've been read into the file now and have been for a while, the aspect of revenue, from what I understand, is 4.9 million. And that's basically 1.6 million per year for the 3 years that the contracts were open, which is what I understand that went through a staff augmentation contract at CBSA. So it wasn't actually an ArriveCan app. It was a directorate or a department level standing offer through TBIPs or through, in this case, BADSI. And so that's the staff augmentation contract that was used to facilitate this, from my understanding. And it was 20 contractors for 3 years for approximately 100 days per year, which is basically part-time.
Thank you. Could you describe your relationship, if any, with GC Strategies and also Coradix?
Sure. I don't have a personal relationship or professional relationship with GC. I mean, they, from my understanding, again, getting read into the file, they were, part of communication from CBSA that there was a task authorization coming that needed to be fulfilled through GC, and as a prime contractor and as a general contractor for that contract, we facilitated that. So that's basically my interaction with GC, which is nil. I've never spoke to any of the principals, and again, I've just been read into the file, and this is what I know. As far as Craddox is concerned, it's a much different relationship. I've been, with them since 2001, 2002. When I first started this company, from Barhaven on my kitchen table, and going after, the first Indigenous contract that I was awarded in the first year with the RCMP and Bell Canada, and it was to provide hardware into the RCMP. Obviously being, one guy and trying to start a business, I partnered up with Craddox because I know some people, and we've had a very good relationship since then. It's been a kind of a shared services model between two companies. They do, much different work than we do at Dalian as far as security is concerned. So it seemed like a good fit, and and so it's been a 22, 23 year relationship with Craddox. Yeah.
I'd like to hear, in your view, what is the timeline of the events? We've been talking about various dates already in this meeting. What is the timeline of events that has led us to this point?
Timeline of events. So I got to start back again. I'm buried 2 gates deep doing high assurance security, trying to get it out to our warfighters. So getting right into this file was probably my first shot back in October of this year. Realistically, when we got the notification that we needed to go and talk to Ogo. So, from a timeline perspective, that's kind of where I sit from getting right into the file. But after I did, gain some knowledge on it, my understanding that this goes back to 2019. We have a very good contract, or had a very good contract with CBSA, a staff augmentation contract through BASD, and we were doing some good things over there, and that the intent for CBSA was actually to bring over 25% of their server applications from CBSA on-prem to AWS Cloud. And so I think that's kind of where it started in 2019. And then obviously, into the early 2020s, we had this whole COVID outbreak thing happen, and all of this craziness that happened with, the ramp up to getting ArriveCan, out the door. And so, we were a small part of that. We were 4.9 million of that, 1.6 million a year, 20 contracts at part-time. So, from that perspective, that's kind of where I think it started. And then where it finished was May 2023, I think, from what I understand. And that was certainly, well before I started with the public service.
Have you spoken to the RCMP on anything to do with government contracting?
Yeah, no, the RCMP has not been in contact with me at all. No.
Have you spoken to anyone else on this issue? Anyone else who's been looking into the matter, for example, the Auditor General?
No, I have had no interaction with the Auditor General at all, other than I know that our staff noticed the discrepancies within, the Auditor General's report, and they notified the Auditor General on the 30th of January this year of the discrepancy, that it wasn't 7.9, it was 4.9, but that never made it into the report.
You mentioned discrepancies in the report. You just mentioned one of them. Are there any other discrepancies that your staff or yourself have noted in the report that you brought to the attention or plan to bring to the attention of the Auditor General?
Yeah, sure. As it sits right now, I have read the report. I mean, I'm a certified contracts and procurement specialist. That's what I did for my first 100 and some odd days with D&D. And I've been around contracting forever, so I understand it completely. And what I can say, out of the gate is that when I read through the Auditor General's report, it's a good report, but it has vagaries and discrepancies in it, right? And there's incorrect information in it. And one of those incorrect areas is in our revenue stream. 7.9 is not 4.9, 4.9 is not 7.9, it's $3 million difference, and it's 60% delta. So, I mean, from that concept, right there, it's definitely a different aspect. The other side of it is that in key facts and findings, you've got a paragraph in there that says we found 18% of invoices submitted by the contractors that we tested did not provide enough information to determine whether the expenses related to the ArriveCan, the expenses actually related to ArriveCan or another IT project. But, I have a good number of notes on this, and I've gone through the entire thing, and, I've got lots of questions and things like that. So
Thank you, Mr. Chen. That is your time. Maintenant, vous avez la parole pour 6 minutes.
You have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. First of all, Mr. Yo, could you tell us how many employees Dalian has had since 2008?
I tried to understand a bit of that, but unfortunately, there was no interpreter in my ear.
So apparently there's a globe on the bottom of your screen. If you click on that, it will probably give you. J'ai arrêté là.
Est-ce que vous pouvez le recommencer?
Oui, absolument. Oui,
Merci
absolument.
beaucoup.
Oui.
Will I be able to take my time again? Yes.
I do. Yeah, absolutely.
And what?
Okay.
Oh, so if you
Try it
click
again.
on that, you might get various options. Hit the globe.
I think he did.
Okay.
I think he's got it.
Okay, so I've got it on French right now. So if you want to try it again.
You might hear me in French. Alors, est-ce que vous m'entendez en anglais?
Are you hearing me in English or in French now? Is it working?
Now,
Do you hear me in English? So you heard what I said in English.
I did.
Très bien. Okay.
Very well then. So again, 6 minutes again, starting again from the top, like they say in Hollywood. Go ahead, Ms. Desgagneux. Starting again. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Yo, first quick question. How many employees has Dalian had since 2008, please?
2008. Okay, so we had, I believe, up to 7 or 8 full-time employees during the 2008 to 2012, 2013 timeframe. And the reason behind that, well, obviously we were growing. That was a good time for us. But SSC had come in during the 2012, 2013 timeframe, and it changed a lot of our ability to execute with the government. And so there was a lot of downsizing after that and a lot of consolidation. So we've now, moved down, as a matter of fact, down to, 2 full-time employees. But where this kind of gets off the rails is that because we have a partnership with Coradics, right, we have a kind of a shared services model. And so, we were doing shared services before shared services became a thing.
Okay.
So,
Merci.
yep.
Merci, Monsieur Yo.
Thank you. The chronology provided by the Department of National Defense said that you began your employment on September the 19th, 2023. A contract was signed on that same date, September the 19th, 2023, by you. No, excuse me. It was signed on September 28th, 2023. 9 days later, only 9 days later, you signed a contract, whereas you were in the full-time employment of the Department of National Defense. Mr. Yo, when you began your employment, I'd like to call your attention to the fact that public servants must follow the Code of Ethics and Values of the public sector. And it's extremely clear in that Code of Public Sector Values and Ethics, you must declare any appearance of conflict of interest to a line supervisor. Did you do so on September the 29th, 2023?
Yeah. So thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So in retrospect to that, and again, being buried 2 gates deep in D&D and what I do with high assured security there, and also on the 19th and even prior to that, starting to devolve myself from the company. I gave the ability for, as I was moving through the aspect of divestiture, my lawyers and everything else, it took some time, I will agree. And that timing is, not charitable to your timeline of being only a few days. But the short answer is, no, I did not inform anyone at the department that I signed anything. But then again, I did not actually sign it. I had a signature available for the staff at the office for them to use.
Monsieur, vous savez très bien qu'en cours, une signature a un effet juridique.
Sir, you know very well that in court, your signature will have legal value. If somebody places your signature on a contract, you're the one who's responsible. I hope you're aware of this because you're responsible for the contract, which is I don't have the number in front of me, but it was signed on September the 29th. Your signature appears, so you are responsible. You did not inform your hierarchical supervisor. That's at least regarding one very strong appearance of conflict of interest. The newspapers have told us, and according to public accounts, Dalian received roughly $150 million worth of contracts since 2008. I understand they're subcontractors, but for a company that had a maximum of 10 employees, that's a lot of money. Why accept a position at Department of National Defense paying under $100,000 when your two-person company was making $150 million in just a few years?
No, that's a good question, and I appreciate it. So yeah, we had some great years during 2008 and the run up to shared services. We had some pretty lean years between 2013 and now, basically from a hardware software perspective, for sure. But my reasoning for getting back into the department was not based on money. I've done 36 years with the department in varying capacities, whether it's regular force, whether it's reserves, whether it's my contracting time and my 168 days, as a civil servant. But I got back in primarily to drive capability and high assurance, guarding solutions to the warfighters that are in harm's way out in the eastern flank of NATO. So that was my job there. That was my claim to what I do at the department. And because I was there for so long, I understood, and I was at the pinnacle of my technical abilities. So it made sense for me to get in and drive technology down to the warfighters that need it the most. And that's primarily the reason, because I didn't do it for the money.
Mais pendant ce temps-là, il y avait quand même un contrat.
But during that time, there was a signed contract by Dalian with your signature on it, granted by the Department of National Defense to carry out work. How many hours did you spend, and how many hours did Dalian spend on that last contract that I mentioned, signed on September 20th, 2023? What did Dalian do for that?
So again, I just got read into that part of it just recently because it was a very small contract. I think it was $40,000 or maybe $49,000 from what I'm aware of. But it was attached to a hardware sale.
C'est le salaire annuel moyen d'un Québécois.
That's the average annual salary of a Quebecer, $49,000 a year. So a small contract, well, I would perhaps use different terms.
It's but 90% of it, or 75 or 80% of it, goes back to the actual consultant doing the work. But to answer your question, though, there is precedence for how you handle conflict of interest within a 60-day period or windows of that time frame. And I did put in a no access, no contact, no non-disclosure with Dalian within that 60-day period. I actually signed that on the 10th of November, 2023, which was within the 60-day window. After that, we were working with lawyers and getting our stuff together as far as forms and everything was concerned, getting my divestiture done and that sort of stuff during the time frame, and that has already been submitted to D&D as well. But due to the hype and everything else around this particular ArriveCan app, I ended up having to put in my resignation because I was still on probation because I was only there for 668 days. So.
Voilà. Une toute petite question, ça va? Non, ça va.
Okay, that's fine. Next.
Visually, you have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the witness for being with us today on what is a very important topic. My colleagues asked some questions, but I'll have you reiterate some of the responses you had clearly in relation to the origin of your company. When did your company start under the name Dalian?
Well, I started it myself in 2001, 2002. I don't have the exact date on me, but there's documents that stood up the company at that time frame, and I named the company myself. Yeah.
And when did you begin bidding on government contracts?
Shortly thereafter. So it was very shortly thereafter. I was actually talking with Terry Matthews here in town at a breakfast meeting, and he had mentioned to me that I should go after Indigenous business because that was something he was aware of. So at that point, I looked into it and I found an Indigenous contract that I could go after, and I won it within the first year that I started the company.
And how large was your company then, and how large is it now?
Well, it was only one person there because it was from my dining room table in Barhaven. But we have grown. It's grown up in 2008 to 2010, 2012, and then we've obviously contracted a lot because our hardware business is all but dried up, and we still do some professional services.
And so, how much total money in public contracts has your company received?
Total. So I know that from 2015 until now, it's about 100,000. Or sorry, I just want to get this number correct, so please bear with me. Yeah, from 2015 until now, we've got 91 million in contracts on TBIPs, basically the professional services contracts. Yeah.
And what did you do? What is it exactly that your company does?
So we're a hardware and software company as well as a professional services security company. So basically, we go after government contracts as a general contractor. When it comes to our professional services, we hire our contractors through either subcontracting or potentially a JV with another company.
How many subcontractors does your company operate, given particular contracts on average?
On average, not many. We usually do them ourselves, right? Especially
how many
hardware and software
subcontractors
contracts.
do you operate right now?
Again, that's a great question. I don't have that off the top of my tongue, so I'll have to go back to the shop and ask them.
Yeah, it'd be great if you could supply that list as well.
For
and
sure. Yep.
Now, I do want to turn attention to statements that were made by a firm known as Bottler. Their chief executive, named Dutt, told MPs in another committee that she feared Dalian's procurement policies were, quote, another example of monetization and theft using the trauma of marginalized communities, end quote. Why do you think she said that?
Well, I've got my own opinions. There's no question about that, but I'm not sure I can say them here. It's really an unrational statement, to be honest with you. I've been operating for 22 years with the government with, top secret clearances and top secret facility clearances. We are not a bricks and mortars, company. I have an office on the 7th floor at 222 Somerset downtown, and Caradix is down on the 5th. And what I believe is that Bottler, for what they brought to this situation, is that they were hired for 4 or 5 deliverables. They got through 2 of them, and CVSA canceled their task authorization due to whatever reasons they do. And so we got that cancellation of the task authorization. We passed it on to GC. It floated down to Bottler, and they've been not necessarily the kindest to Dalian since. But I'm not sure. And then the costing of this is small in retrospect to the ArriveCan application project.
So Bottler made clear that they were not certain that your firm or other firms, in particular GC Strategies, was aware. They were not aware, they claim, that there were that many subcontractors, including Dalian. When did you become aware that there were subcontractors like Bottler engaged in the same project you were?
Yeah. Again, I'm 2 gates deep in D&D on a pretty much a daily basis, helping them over there, getting the right capabilities in the right hands of the warfighters. So I got read into this as quickly as I could in the fall, and especially when Bottler was making the waves they were, which I think was inappropriate. But no, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, with Bottler, it's unfortunate that they took that tact. So I don't know if I answered your question, so I apologize for that. So if I didn't answer your question, ask it again, please.
No, sure. I'll ask it in a different way. The issues that were brought forward by Bottler include layers of subcontracting that hide key details about who is getting paid for what, the cozy ties between private staffing firms, and of course, those public servants that ultimately influence that decision. Please comment directly on your knowledge related to the subcontracting and whether or not, in your mind, key details about who was getting paid for what was clear.
Yeah. Yeah, again, I think that subcontracting happens all the time. I mean, we are the prime contractor on a lot of contracts, and then we sub out a lot of our work to other subcontractors, and it happens in every industry. It doesn't matter whether
But
it's
in the
pens,
government,
pencils.
the government's a very particular, this is public money. It's very important that
for
we
sure.
understand that we have the utmost attention to the integrity of our public service. So again, do you believe that there were key details being hidden by way of layers, multiple layers of subcontracting?
Yeah, I'm not aware of that, no.
And so I'll leave my longer
You got
question.
a small one, go. If you have a quick question, go for it.
Well, I'll just preface it. In my next round of questions, I'll speak to you directly on this point as to your knowledge on subcontracting, how many other subcontractors there were, and the numbers associated with those subcontracts, as well as the tasks authorization process as well.
Thank you, Mr. Desjardins. Now opening our second round. Mr. Brock, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, Mr. Yo. I understand from earlier testimony, you became a public servant with DND on September the 19th of 2023, and you last testified before a committee on October 31st, 2023, approximately a month and a half after you secured full-time employment as a public servant. So the question I put to you is, and I've read the transcript of your previous testimony, sir, at no point in time, despite being asked several questions about the nature of your employment, you focused squarely on your directorship and your shares within Dalian, and you said absolutely nothing about the fact that you were a public servant. So it begs the question, why would you withhold that information from Canadians?
Yep. Appreciate the question. So this needs to be analyzed a little bit more. And it was September 19th that I joined the public service. It was 42 days later that the meeting, came to us, and we were invited as Dalian. I was invited to come to you and speak at OGO as Dalian. The understanding is that Dalian holds a top secret facility clearance. And those that know what a top secret facility clearance is knows. And I hold a higher, and did hold a higher than top secret security clearance for Dalian. As well, in my short time of 42 days with the department, I also have a top secret clearance there and a secret clearance. So, by nature of that aspect, and the fact that this had zero to do with D&D, it had zero to do with what I do during the day as a high assurance specialist for the department. It has zero to do with my employment there, as well as the fact that.
Okay, sir, I'm going to stop you there because my time, sir, I'm going to stop you there. My time is limited. I don't accept your response, and I think most Canadians don't accept that response. After a month and a half, you were divesting your interests in Dalian. You had resigned as a director. You put all of your interest in a blind trust, and you were working on a full-time basis with DND, correct? You had no interest in Dalian, yet you gave the impression that you were still an active participant in this two-person company. So, sir, with respect, I completely disagree with your word salad of an explanation, because it just doesn't add up. Now, I'm going to move on to a monetary aspect. You confirmed to my NDP colleague that you received $91 million in federal contracts since Justin Trudeau essentially took over government in 2015. What is your commission rate of that $91 million?
So as a business from Dalian's perspective, and these were TBIP's professional services contracts.
Sir, just the commission rate, please.
Sure. But I need to preface that to make sure that.
No, you don't. I'm asking for a number, sir, or a range. Yeah. What is your commission?
Most of the time, it ranges between 12 and 20%. And in this case, for the ArriveCan aspect, okay, that 91 million wasn't ArriveCan, by the way, but for the ArriveCan aspect, it was 18.2 from what my staff told me.
18.2% for ArriveCan. And you said you disagree with the AG's report that you only received 4.9 million.
1.6 million a year, yes.
Okay. So your 18.2% of 4.9, I can't do the quick math. Was that shared between you and your partner?
Yeah, no, so you have to understand that's
Sir,
gross profit, right?
was it shared between you and your partner? Is it a 50-50 share operation with your other partner?
It's a gross profit, and when it gets to be a gross profit, you have to factor in expenses, employees, wages, commissions.
I understand that, sir. Were you sharing
the end
in,
of it, sure.
were you sharing in the profits 50-50?
So no, not 50-50. I'm a majority shareholder in Dalian.
Okay,
Why
so
would I share
what, so what
50-50?
was your share of the $4.9 million?
Well, it's not $4.9 million though. It's revenue. That's $4.9 million in revenue.
Okay, let's not
It's
play
different.
games. What did you take home? What was your commission for ArriveCan? Give me a number, please.
There is no number because
Why not?
when you own a business and you have multiple,
You have to
aspects of
declare
that
this as
business-
income, sir. So why
Sure, of
would
course,
you not
but
have this number? You're going to provide
but
this committee, sir. You're going to provide this committee within 7 days your actual remuneration or bonuses on the ArriveCan app. Okay, within 7 days.
If we get asked to do that, sir, we will absolutely provide it. It's not an issue.
And then over and above that 4.9 million, I want to know.
You're out of time, but you've asked for some documents. I just want to ensure that Mr. Yeo, is that you received a request from a member to provide some financial documents. Is that something you're prepared to do? Is that something you can do within a reasonable amount of time? I say that because often witnesses will agree to provide information that is requested by the committee. I think you said if you're asked by the committee, you would do so. We can formally do that, but we tried to avoid that. Is that the information Mr. Brock asked you to provide? Is that something you could do?
Yeah. Like I said, I'm willing to support the committee on anything and everything that you guys need to be able to get to where you need to go. So if there's a request for what kind of remuneration would have come out of 4.9 million in ArriveCan, then we will provide that.
Okay, sure. I appreciate that. I also, Mr. Brock mentioned 7 days. I'm a little more generous. You have a couple weeks to get that before you begin to get some calls from my assistants on this committee. But thank you. I appreciate the clarity on that.
I can assure you we'll get back.
I believe you will. Thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Brock, that is your time. Moving now to Ms. Yip. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Yeo. Could I also ask that when you send in the documents for that you also include your commission on a contract between D&D and Dalian in 2013?
D&D and Dalian in 2013.
Okay.
Could I ask for a few more details about that? That's somewhat vague. Yeah. Like I'm not sure which contract you're talking about back then, 10 years ago.
TRN Technologies.
TRM Technologies. Okay. Oh, you must be talking about my consulting.
Yes.
Is that what you're asking for?
Yes.
Okay.
Just let me. I'll just pause the clock. Is that clear, Mr. Yao?
Well, I think it's clear. I think she's asking for my consulting contract from TRM back in 2013. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That is it. Thank you.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you.
The clock's rolling again. Thanks, Ms. Yip.
Okay, thank you.
Hi.
Was Dalian on your resume when you applied to D&D?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, just from that perspective, I've been a consultant at D&D for 22 years, and it's been through Dalian, and they're very well aware that I contract through Dalian. Yeah.
Okay. When you became a full-time employee, actually, you know what? Let's go back and look at it step by step through the hiring process and the ethics and conflict forms that you signed. Can you tell us what you signed?
So through the public service, there's a natural progress, and that was followed to the letter as far as the department is concerned. I did receive a letter of offer on the 19th, I received the letter of offer on the 5th of September, and then we went back and forth a little bit, and I signed it on shortly after that, and with a start date of the 19th of September. And so within that offer is obviously the level that I went in at, which was an IT3, which everybody can look at and see what that level is. And also, obviously a bunch of background information on the whole aspect of DOADs and codes of ethic and the rest of it. So yes.
So you did sign a conflict of interest?
I don't think, no, I didn't sign a conflict. I signed the offer, but within the offer, they describe multiple paragraphs, and one of them has to do with conflict. Yeah.
Okay. So Dalian signed a contract with D&D after you became an employee again in the fall of 2021. This is obviously a conflict of interest. Why did you not feel you were in conflict?
Sure. So at that time, I had my hands off the wheel of Dalian even before the 19th of September. And so that's why I provided, my signature to the staff. So if there was something going on, that I would be, not even aware of it. So, and in all honesty, I was not even aware that this smaller contract had even come through until I started getting read into this file for our meetings.
You said that there were a lot of paragraphs in your contract dealing with conflict of interest. Can you just explain a little bit more about that?
So not like there wasn't multiple paragraphs dealing with conflict. It was multiple paragraphs just describing, our relationship or my relationship with D&D as it relates to the PIPSI union, as it relates to, healthcare, as it relates to a bunch of different things that you would normally have on an offer. But there was one paragraph in there for sure on conflict. Yeah.
Okay. Are you satisfied with your work on ArriveCan? Do you feel that Canadians got good value for money there?
Oh, that's a great question. As a certified, high tech, not only a consultant, but security specialist, certified in many different areas from IT. From an IT perspective, purely, I believe that the aspect of putting all of that together, getting the coding done, getting it on an AWS landing spot, getting it onto all of the cybersecurity, all of the other healthcare PII information that needed to be adjudicated and coded into the application. Is it fair value? I would have probably booked it in at about 25 to 30 million with probably a 10 or 15% contingency, which is around the number that it would come in at around 40 or 45 million.
Have you ever belonged to a political party?
Yes.
Which one?
I have two, actually. I've been basically a PC supporter for a long time. But during the election period of 2021, I did move over to the PPC party and then moved back to the PC party after that.
Oh.
Very good. That is your time, Ms. Yep.
Oh, just when it was getting...
Suivant, c'est Madame Sigrid Desgagnés.
Next, we have Madame Desgagnés.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. J'aimerais continuer sur...
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to continue with what I was asking about earlier. Perhaps I could assist you, given that you didn't remember exactly how much you pocketed with ArriveCan. Perhaps that money was deposited in tax haven accounts. According to what the press has found, you opened accounts in your name in tax havens on 2 occasions since 2011. How much money did you put into tax havens, Mr. Yeo?
Yep. No, first of all, the press, they come out with their fake news on me being an employer of the government for decades. So I mean, you got to take that for what it's worth. But yeah, in reference to that, this goes back to my Afghanistan days. I'll be honest with you. 2008, 2009, 2010, before I went to Afghanistan, I was traveling all over the world and basically going to NATO planning meetings, going to NATO operational planning meetings.
On n'ouvre pas des comptes de banque dans les endroits où on voyage.
We don't open bank accounts in places we're traveling through. Even if you travel for diplomatic purposes, you don't normally open bank accounts when you travel.
Yeah, but I was a consultant back then. But it gave me an awareness of international I'm an entrepreneur first, right? I'm an entrepreneur first. I'm a soldier second, and I own Dalian third.
Pouvez-vous répondre, s'il vous plaît, combien d'argent a été placé?
Could you answer the question? How much money was it declared was invested where it was declared to be a tax haven? Zero. You opened accounts in places where they put no money in. Why did you open the accounts?
So I was getting to that. So, as an entrepreneur, I am very interested in international business, and so, when I came back from Afghanistan, I looked into trying to understand how to do international business. And that's what led me to figuring out how to do an EIBC and figuring out how to do international bank accounts and things like that. It was just purely an exercise on, my own, entrepreneurship and trying to figure out stuff. But yeah, no, there's no smoking gun there. There's nothing down there.
Votre réponse est hallucinante, Monsieur Yeo. Pour faire
Your answer is unbelievable because to be an entrepreneur, you open bank accounts in tax havens. It's just unbelievable. Next question. Let's continue with your affiliation with the People's PPC of Mr. Bernier. You ran for them, is that correct?
Yes.
Et connaissez-vous
And what's your connection with Mr. Bernier? Did you know him for a long time?
No. I obviously being with the PP or the PC party and him obviously going after the leadership during the Andrew Scheer days. That's my awareness of him, but I hadn't met him before, to be honest with you.
Vous êtes présenté pour le Parti populaire sans
You ran for the People's Party of Canada without knowing the person who was recruiting for the People's Party?
Say again?
You ran for the People's Party of Canada without knowing the key person who was recruiting candidates for that party?
No, of
connaissez
course I
pas
knew
Monsieur
Max.
Bernier?
Yeah,
You didn't know Mr. Bernier?
as a leader that was trying to be a part of the
Vous n'avez
leadership
jamais
of the
rencontré
Tea
Monsieur
Party.
Bernier
What?
personnellement?
You never personally met Mr. Bernier?
Wait.
It sounds like no, but
Wait,
the question is, have you ever met did you meet Mr. Bernier?
Oh, yes, absolutely. On a couple of occasions.
Et voilà.
For sure.
I will.
Sorry.
Yes, I will. I'm going to pocket all this for relevance at a future committee meeting when I'm being raised about relevance. But anyway, for now, tell that to Mr. Desjardins, and of course, my belief that members have wide latitude to ask questions. This will be Exhibit A. Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll just follow up on that last question, and then I'll go to another question if I have enough time. But in relation to your political affiliation, you said you're an active member of the Conservative Party today?
Correct. Yeah.
And do you make fiscal donations to the Conservative Party?
I have, yeah, since 2020, yeah.
Have you ever met with or lobbied on behalf of your company with any members of the Conservative Party?
Absolutely not.
Have you ever registered in the lobbyist registry?
No, definitely not.
You've never registered in the lobbyist registry?
No.
Have you ever
I've never
spoken
been-
about your company to a government official?
No, definitely not. Yeah,
Okay,
I mean,
moving on then.
sorry.
In terms of my previous line of questioning on your knowledge about the execution of contracts and subcontracting and task authorizations, it's clear what was made in testimony in prior committees that in relation to Bottler, it's very clear from their testimony that they did not provide consent, written consent of their knowledge that you had executed a contract in their name, a subcontract, without their knowledge. Is that true?
Yeah, as far as we're aware, when it comes to Bottler, they had a task authorization. We had a task authorization come from CBSA that was going to GC Strategies. That's our relationship with, that's where it stops, is with GC Strategies. They hired Bottler as a subcontractor underneath them. So our relationship was really with GC Strategies, and Bottler's relationship was with GC Strategies. We didn't have a direct relationship with Bottler.
And so you feel as though that your relationship with GC Strategies in this case was your level of accountability to the task authorization and not to the other subcontractors of GC Strategies. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, in normal circumstance, the prime contractor and the subcontractor have the relationship. If there's other things happening below that, then we have no influence on that.
And considering you're engaged in the same project, it seems unbecoming that you did not have knowledge that GC Strategies had this sophisticated layer of task authorizations, that hid the actual work that these subcontractors were doing, including your company. And I'll ask one more time, what does your company do? What did you do absent of hire other subcontractors?
Yeah, it's the normal course of action for general contractors. You can find that in any.
No,
industry
what
that
do you
deals
do
with the
other than
government.
that?
Other than that, so I'm trying to get to that. You know, when it comes to what we do, and this was asked to me in OGO as well, and so
Yeah, it's still
I'm sure
confusing.
that's yeah, well, it happens with every company.
No,
across the
this
entire
happens with your
country,
company. I'm
as it
asking about
does.
your company, sir.
Okay,
What
that's
does
fine,
your
but I'm telling-
company actually do?
Yeah.
Mr. Agent,
what
I'm
I'm
going to
telling
give
you
the
is
floor
that as
to
a
Mr.
general
Yao for an
contractor-
answer, but your time is up,
Yeah.
so please don't interrupt him. Mr. Yao, I'll allow you to answer. Moving on to the next person.
Yeah, every general contractor with the government, when it comes to TBIPS contracts, PS Online, TSPS, it doesn't matter. You know, we are the general contractor and the prime contractor for the government. We hire subcontractors to do the work. So what we do is contract management, not the actual work.
Thank you very much. Turning now to Mr. Genuous, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Yao, it's good to see you again. You testified before Parliament on October the 31st of last year. I did at the time ask you, what would you say you do here? And this was one answer you gave in the course of that round. You said, I am an executive on the board of directors for Dalian, and I maintain all of the governance as it relates to the PSAB. Mr. Yao, was that the truth as of October 31st of 2023?
So, Mr. Chair, just a correction, it's Mr. Yo, okay, not Yao.
How about just an answer?
But then I will answer you for sure. But you know, it ends up that we were in that time frame of dealing with lawyers, and I had been, you know, directing at a director level for the company.
October the 31st, you were before this committee.
Yeah.
You answered my question in a particular way. Was what you said to the committee then assembled on October the 31st, was it the truth?
So at that time, there was no divestiture because we were working on it. And
were
also I
you
had put
quote
in a-
on the were you quote an executive on the board of directors for Dalian? Were you the one who quote maintained all of the governance on October the 31st? Was that true? Yes or no?
Sure. Yes.
It was true.
Well, that's the answer you're looking for, so I'm going to give it to you.
No, sir. I'm looking for the
Right.
true answer.
So the true answer is
Just as I
we were
was on
in
October the
flux.
31st.
We were in flux during that time period in order to, obviously, we had 60 days to get everything done. And we did that with Dalian and got our non-disclosure in and our no access.
Okay,
in
sir,
within that 60-day period.
you're not in flux. You either were on the board of directors or you weren't on the board of directors, right? You know, a person is either pregnant or not. They're either on the board of directors or they're not on the board of directors. They're not half pregnant and they're not half on the board of directors. You have said that shamefully the media have claimed that you were on the board of directors and a government employee at the same time without asking you. Well, maybe they didn't need to ask you because they foolishly assumed that what you told Parliament on October the 31st was true. Now, sir, your LinkedIn account says that you were a business owner at Dalian Enterprises from 2001 until present, and you were employed by the Department of National Defense continuously from 1987 until present. So, again, to your truthfulness or not, was your LinkedIn account accurate in description of those timelines?
Well, if you look at LinkedIn, it is a non-authoritative source. First of all, it's LinkedIn. It's a web page. All right.
Yeah. Why would we believe what's on the internet, sir? It's your own LinkedIn profile, sir. Why would we expect that you would put accurate information on your own LinkedIn page? Outrageous.
All right, just
so Chair, I'm okay.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to answer that question. If I could.
Well, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Genuous. It is his round of questioning. I'll just ask you to. We can all hear you quite clearly, so if you could just keep that in mind, Mr. Genuous.
Thank you, Chair. I am getting a little bit excited here because. Mr. Yao,
You have
Yo.
Mr. Yo, whatever your name is, sir.
Yo, man.
All right, all right. Hold on, Mr. Genuous. I would ask. Names are important.
Okay.
We all make mistakes, but if you could conduct yourselves in a way that shows our witness respect,
Okay,
I'd
it's Janice,
appreciate it.
by the way, but
That's a good point. Yes, and it's William's son. I realize.
if we're
that.
insisting,
All right, you have a minute and a half left, Mr. Genuous.
okay. Sir, you have on your LinkedIn profile a claim that you were simultaneously working for the government and leading Dalian. You told this committee on October the 31st, pardon me, not this committee, but you told that committee on October 31st that you were you were on the board of directors for Dalian. You were at the time employed by the government. And you have subsequently said, oh, no, there was some flux going on. But you clearly were in a conflict of interest, weren't you, sir? You were clearly doing both at the same time. And now you're trying to weasel your way out of it after the fact, but you were clearly in a conflict of interest, were you not?
So, okay, so I need to answer the LinkedIn side of it first. First of all, it's a non-authoritative source and it's on the internet.
It's
and
your profile.
It did say 1987.
Did you write it?
It did not describe all of my service that I have done. I have done 14 years in the Reg Force, 10 years in the reserves, 20 years as a contractor. I've had 36 years in the department.
Did you
LinkedIn.
subcontract the writing of your LinkedIn profile, sir?
Probably could have or should have.
Your time.
So
for one
I
last
needed to
question,
answer
Mr.
your
Genuous.
question. You asked me a question and I'm trying to answer it, okay? The department has deemed.
Were you
I
not in a
understand,
conflict
we're
of
not- I was not
interest
in- no.
being on the board of directors of Dalian at the same
My
time as you were an employee of a department that was giving contracts to a company that you, according to your testimony before Parliament, were on the board of directors of?
Thank you, Mr.
My
Genuous. That is your
understanding is
time.
that
I will allow
D&D
for an answer, please. Yes, I will allow you to answer, Mr. Genuous. Your time is expired. You have the floor,
Thanks,
sir.
Mr. Chair. Yeah. My understanding is that D&D has made a statement that there was no conflict of interest. Period.
Thank you. Turning now to Ms.
Well, that puts it to rest then, doesn't it?
Turning now to Ms. Bradford, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Yo, getting back to your aborted political career, where you were a candidate for the PPC, do you not, a party that was against vaccine mandates, do you not see any hypocrisy in working on an ArriveCan app that was designed to track people's vaccine records? And when you actually didn't believe in the vaccine mandates in the first place and were running for a party, that actually took that position?
Yeah, there's definitely a why as to why, and thank you for the question. There was a why as to why I was trying to become a member of parliament, much like you folks around the table today. And I wish somebody would ask me about that at some point during this time period, because it's a much different answer than you think. Second of all, when it comes to vaccine mandates, I'm buried 2 gates deep at D&D, and then at nights and weekends, I'm doing work with the PPC for the election. And so, from my side of it, I had no visibility into a low-level contract that was with a staff augmentation contract with CBSA and the work that was going on, for the ArriveCan. We were doing a much more work than just ArriveCan, and so I had no visibility at the time.
So I just want you to go back again, because I'm a bit confused. Are you saying, I think a previous answer was that Dalian and you personally actually did no actual work on the ArriveCan app? You subcontracted it all. Is that correct? You didn't actually do any actual work on that?
I mean, like we're prime contractors on a staff augmentation contract that staffs, subject matter experts into CBSA to actually perform the work, like to code the application and project management and security and everything else. So saying we don't do any work is a little not true, but at the end of the day, we do subcontract out that work to subject matter experts that do eventually make their way into CBSA to actually perform the work. Yes.
So you got 18.2% commission rate on the $4.9 million ArriveCan contract. Is that correct? That's about $89,000 in commission.
That's what my staff has told me is 18.2. Yeah.
So how much was your overhead, and how much was the remaining profit?
I'd have to go and ask our CFO to try and figure that out. But we have my office in 222 Somerset, we have employees, commissions, everything else like that. So I'm not sure what the exact number is, to be honest with you.
But most of the work is subcontracted out to others. That's correct.
Absolutely. Yeah, like in some cases, it's our own, consulting bench that goes out to do this. And in some cases, we did some work with GC.
Now, if you're the majority shareholder in the company, what percentage of the net profit do you get?
Well, that's a question of, how much expenses are within the company. But, in normal shareholder perspective, if you are a majority shareholder and you have minority shareholders, at the end of the year, everybody's T5'd out as far as dividends is concerned if we have a profit.
So going back to when you formed your company in 2001 or 2002, basically Dalian was formed to go after Indigenous contracts?
Yeah, absolutely, because of my background and heritage, yeah.
Right. So then if you subcontract everything else out to other companies, they don't have to be Indigenous service providers?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I helped Alan Frost with a number of other companies start the PSAB. He had already got it going, but we had, helped him formulate some of the policies back then. And it was basically for entrepreneurs that needed to have access to government contracts. So from that perspective, it was all about having ownership in the company and having the ability to grow the company through government contracts, and then potentially either start another company or potentially hire employees and keep growing your own business. It's a very good policy.
Okay, now in your testimony, Mr. Yeo, you mentioned that you provided your signature to your staff to use when needed. Do you think that was appropriate under the circumstances, looking back on it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was divesting myself from the company. I had no hands on the business after the 19th of September, and actually prior to that. And they still need to get stuff signed. So you see that all the time in big corporations, where there's signatures provided.
I think a person's signature indicates that you're personally tied into that contract or that deal. I think people don't look at a signature thinking, well, that's not really Mr. Yeo. That's just, just somebody else that is signing for Mr. Yeo. I think they would probably think that you were overseeing it or responsible and to stand behind your signature.
Yeah. Ultimately, I own the company and I'm responsible, right? And I've taken that hit, and I'm no longer with D&D, and my company's been terminated as far as all contracts are concerned. So I'm taking the direct hit on this. But what I can tell you is that this does happen.
And thank you. That is the time. Beginning our third round with Mr. Nader, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Yeo, for joining us this afternoon. I want to clarify a few things. Can you confirm that you resigned from the public service on March 5th, 2024? Is that correct?
March the 5th, 2024. That is correct. Yep.
Now you'd said that D&D had made a statement that there was no conflict of interest. Was that made directly to you, or who made the?
No, it was out in the media outlets. Yeah.
Did you ever receive a report from D&D related to the conflict of interest?
No. It was an alleged conflict that somebody put up, I guess. Then, and what I've heard in the papers, and I know in my own heart, there was no conflict.
So you never received a report on March 3rd of a conflict of interest report from the Department of National Defense?
I did not, no.
Okay. We will follow up on that another time. You mentioned that you had been a consultant for a number of years with the Department of National Defense. I think often we see examples of consultants who work within the department almost parallel to, or often in conjunction and integrated with public servants. Did you ever personally have such a relationship at D&D in which you worked at D&D HQ or worked closely with full-time indeterminate public servants during your time as a consultant?
Well, the way the consultant aspect works for most of the departments is that absolutely you are the subject matter expert player within the directorate, and you have absolutely public servants that manage you on a day-to-day basis. So the interactions there, yeah, absolutely.
So very similar to an employment situation, although you would be on a contract rather than an employee of His Majesty's Public Service. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd go with the employment side of it. You're there as a contractor, right? So through TBIPs, through SBIPs, through PS Online, or one of those other staff augmentation contracts. And then there's a pretty clear line. You have zero ability to sign off or do anything as a consultant, right? So.
And during that period, were you physically working at D&D HQ?
Not at HQ, no. No, I worked for ADM MAT, which is actually under DGLEPM, under the Army side of it.
But you did work at a government office?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, I was a part of the whole directorate for 22 years, yeah.
Okay, but at a government office. Okay. When was the first time you cashed a check or e-transfer for your ArriveCan app work? When was the first time you received payment? You mentioned 4.9 million over 3 years. What was the date of the first payment receipt?
Like, are you talking about a commission or something like that?
No, the first payment from the government for your work on ArriveCan.
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure that's right. I'd have to check with our CFO shop. I don't have that detail on me. Yeah.
Okay, I'd appreciate getting that information on the first date that you received, as well as the last date. Are you able to tell us approximately when that last payment came through?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our CFO shop would have all of that detail, and we would provide that to you on a timely basis for sure.
I would appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
I was thanking the witness. I just acknowledging his agreement. So you've got 90 seconds to go. Sorry, Mr. Nader.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. You'd mentioned in your opening statements how you were either putting your interests in Dalian into a blind trust, or you had already put them into a blind trust when you joined the public service. Can you clarify what you meant by a blind trust?
Oh, sure. So when you do a divestiture, there's lawyers involved, and you have to divest your shares. You have to put them in to a trustee, and there's a lot of documentation back and forth in order to facilitate that. And we did start that right away. My meetings with my lawyers and things like that happened November all the way through into January, and we put the non-disclosure, non-access in with Dalian at the same time, and eventually we did put in all of our documents with D&D, but in hindsight, I'll be honest with you, in hindsight, knowing what I know now and the whole situation that we've run up against here, there's a direct response from me that I should have put all of that in, even previous to signing the offer, and I should have done all of that prior to even looking at the offer from the government. So that one's on me, but at the end of the day, all of the information did get to where it needed to go.
I'm going to push you a little bit on this.
Sure.
When we hear the term blind trust, I mean, it's tough to see how a blind trust would work when you were the founder and majority shareholder of a corporation named Dalian, which you can't all of a sudden forget you own, whether it's visible in a blind trust or not. But you also use the term divesting your interests in it. So I'm not entirely clear which one you were trying to do. Were you trying to put your corporation to blind trust, which again, I'm not sure how arm's length that could be, or were you divesting yourself of your corporation at that time? We know now you're back in full swing with the company, but what was actually your intent at the time? Was it to have it in an arm's length, untouchable entity of a blind trust, or were you divesting? Were you selling off your shares? Were you divesting yourself of your corporation at the time? It's not clear what you were doing while you were active as a member of the Public Service of Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Nader. That is your time. I will certainly allow for reply. Yes, Mr. Yeo.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, absolutely. It was not a divestiture, but a blind trust, and I did acquire a trustee that I trusted to hold my shares, and that's the course of action that we took. So if I mentioned divestiture, that's not the case.
Thank you. That is the time. Turning out to Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. And Mr. Yeo, I think you've managed to do something that actually should happen here at Public Accounts, which is to have all members equally questioning what it is that we're hearing and wanting to get to the truth of the matter for the sake of frankly, for the public trust. And that's where I, for one, find your story has a number of holes in it, although it does come together in one way. You mentioned early on that you met a gentleman, Terry Matthews. Who was that?
He's a business owner in Canada and a billionaire, actually. So.
Okay, so someone who knows how to make money, because you mentioned that you're not really in it for the money, but you met with someone who knows how to make money. And he said you should get in on, how did you put it? Indigenous
Indigenous
angle
that he became, indigenous procurement that he became aware of. Yeah.
That he became aware of. So he put you on to something. And indeed, that's what business people do. Now, you were not in business at the time, as you said. You had no experience with technical work, coding. What was your background? You were a reservist with the armed forces.
Well, I mean, if you predate my experience, I went through for computer science, and I've been involved with computers my whole life. But certainly, the aspect of my military career and my reserve career, and then eventually getting back into my high-tech world after all of that experience was the direction that I took.
So was your intention then to start up a technical services company where you yourself, as an Indigenous person, as you have identified yourself to us, would then be providing services to the government, who was at the time, and this has covered, of course, a number of governments trying to promote Indigenous businesses?
Yeah, in actual fact, the company started out as a hardware and software company. We didn't really get into professional services until 2007, 2008. So our initial,
was it your intention then, when you did get into professional services, to hire Indigenous employees?
Absolutely.
Can you say that you have used your access to Indigenous contracts to hire Indigenous employees?
Absolutely, and we did have Indigenous employees in the shop. Yeah.
All right. Well, at least that. Now, going back to, but somehow it didn't work out. You had high points and low points. You weren't making money. At some point, you decided to get yourself hired again with DND. You entered into a contract of service. Referring to your contract, there were a number of paragraphs there actually that refer to the Code of Ethics for the public sector, and also to the Conflict of Interest Code. In one such paragraph, there's actually a form called the Confidential Report, Form DND 2839, which talks specifically about conflict of interest. This is in your contract that you yourself signed. Do you recall this form that you would have signed? So it does speak specifically to conflict of interest, which is not something that you have been forthcoming about here in earlier testimony. And you seem to be an equal opportunity conflict of interest, how shall we say, operator, because it goes on to talk about political activities where federal public service employees have a right to engage in political activities while maintaining the principle of political impartiality in the public service. And that there's information to that regard. Is that something that you also recall signing?
It's definitely in the offer, but the political side of it was back in 21.
All right. And then going back to when you did decide to become a member of Parliament, and I'd like to hear why you decided that, because at the time you were operating Dalian, and that you had contracts with DND, so that were involved in the ArriveCan. And as other colleagues have pointed out, hard to believe that you did not know that Dalian was working on ArriveCan. So why did you decide to become a member of Parliament to run as a candidate?
So, in true form, as my Indigenous heritage, side of it, my great-grandfather signed the treaties in 1923 in November. In the spring of 2024, the colonials came back through and enfranchised my whole entire family. They enfranchised hundreds of people, and they enfranchised
So you ran for the
people.
People's Party of Canada in recognition of your Indigenous ancestry. Is that correct?
I'm definitely getting to my why for sure, and that is that my entire family has been enfranchised, and I am caught up in the second-gen cutoff rule. This is a politically genocidal article out of Bill C-31 that still is in the Indian Act today. And my entire family is caught up in it, and hundreds of thousands of Canadians are caught up in it. So my why as to why I wanted to get back in as a member of parliament was to actually create a private members bill that would allow that part of the act, the Indian Act, to be solved once and for all, which would not only help me, but help hundreds of thousands of Canadians.
Thank you. That is your time, Ms. Shanahan. Maintenant, c'est Madame Sinclair encore pour 2 minutes 30 secondes, s'il vous plaît.
Monsieur Yo,
Mr. Yo, you declared previously, and you've just done it again today, that you placed your company into a trust so that you would have, it would be a blind trust. Did you inform your team and the people that support you of this process?
The team at Dalian were definitely aware that we were going through this process, yes.
mais donc, comprennent-ils qu'apposer une signature
Do they understand that placing a signature is the same as placing approval? So by placing your signature, it was your responsibility and you no longer had a right. If you were no longer supposed to be intervening in Dalian's business, you were not supposed to be signing. That's very basic. Who placed your signature there
à votre place sans que vous le
without you knowing about it?
It would have been, my staff that I directed. So this is definitely on me. I would have directed my staff. I did direct my staff to, while I was in this area of being able to work with the department and also, put everything into a blind trust, that I gave them the authority to go ahead
Okay.
and make sure, and I trusted them. So
Tout à l'heure, vous avez dit que Dalian
You just said that Dalian only had 2 employees, you and your partner. So who's the staff?
yeah, so that's kind of where, there's a misinterpretation of that. We have 2 people on staff as far as our full-time employment is concerned, but we have a shared services model with Coradics that allows us to work with, CFO, HR, operations, etc.
OK.
It's been
Donc,
like
c'est
that for
quelqu'un
20
chez
years.
Coradix qui utilisait votre
So someone from Coradix used your signature without your consent, whereas you had requested to be in a blind trust? Who placed the signature in your stead without your consent?
No, it was one of my members of staff that I gave the authority to use my signature.
D'accord,
while I
mais vous
was at
venez de
D&D.
répondre que c'est quelqu'un
But you've just said it was someone from Coradix. If your company, if Dalian is you and your partner, was it your partner who then placed your signature without your consent? Why didn't he sign if he's also an owner?
So he's not an owner. He is a member of my staff, and I gave him the authority to use my signature while I was at D&D.
Donc, vous êtes l'unique propriétaire de Dalian.
So you're the sole owner of Dalian, nobody else? Have I understood you correctly? There is no partner?
Well, I have Coradics as a partner, yes, as a minority shareholder, yeah.
D'accord. Mais c'est
Very well. Could you give me the name of the individual who placed your signature and who therefore did not inform you that he was signing contracts in your stead?
So I gave them the authority to use my
d'accord, c'est qui
signature.
c'est qui
So
Je demande un
I'm asking you for a name. Who?
yeah. So a member of my staff gave that I gave my authority to, and his name is Kyle Dixon. Like I'm at a point right now where you have to understand that I'm trying to help you guys get where you need to go and give you the answers that you need. If you want people's names in my staff, I'll give you all of the names in my
Donc-
staff.
Et voilà. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Next, Mr. Desjardins.
Please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. At the very beginning, Mr. Yo, you mentioned, quote, you were hired on September 29th, 2023. So why did Corporations Canada have you listed as a director until March 2024?
So it was 19 September. So the 19th of September, 2023 is when I started with my employment with the public service. And as far as, Contracts Canada getting their updates, like I said, my lawyers were putting all of the documents and everything together and staffing that through for me. And that's the date that they have on record.
So when did you first become interested in working in the public service?
When did I first become interested?
After your incorporation of your company, sorry.
After the incorporation. So I've really been, working with the department for 36 years. It was just recently that I decided, because I've got, 5, 6 years, maybe 7 years left of working, that I would actually look to go back and provide more value to the department by driving some of their large projects. So
in that time, did you disclose a potential conflict of interest?
So as a contractor, I've been working with the department for 22 years. So, having the discussions about me moving over to the public service, has been very recent, because I just signed on the 19th of September. So, I'm not sure.
So
if I
from
answered your
September
question
to
or not.
March, the time between those 2 dates, the time you left Dalian, the time you were a public servant, at any moment in there, did you declare a potential conflict of interest?
To the department?
To the department.
Or to the department. So we were in the process of doing that over the fall and into January, and getting all the documents and paperwork together to put everything into a blind trust and that sort of stuff. And it's on me, because we probably should have done that way before the 19th of September, and we didn't. And
So you're aware that
I'm-
there is a conflict, which is
No,
why you
no.
undertook that work.
But the D&D has come back out and said there was no conflict because of I don't know why the whole idea of the conflict is a little bit nebulous to begin with, because of my position in D&D and the documents I put together for Dalian to put in a no access and no visibility into what they were doing since the 19th.
On that
So-
blind trust, who's the trustee?
Kyle Dixon.
And how do you know them?
He's a member of my staff, and he's been a stalwart worker of mine for a long time.
And at any point between your discussions of the declaration of conflict and this employee you have, was the conversation of the paperwork that never got done? At what point did he bring that up as a potential issue?
So the paperwork did get done. It just could have been at a more timely basis, like prior to me joining on the 19th. But if you could repeat your question, I'll answer it.
Do you know, I'll ask it in a different way if I can, Mr. Chair. Did you know there was a potential conflict before your trustee, or before your trustee made you aware of that? Or did you ask your employee to be your trustee in your knowledge that there may be a potential conflict?
No, I didn't ask my employee, but I got to make sure I get that right. So the whole idea of putting in the appropriate documentation and putting things into a blind trust happened over all the fall and into the early part of 2024.
I'm trying to understand why you didn't make that clearer before.
Sorry, clearer in what way?
Okay, the very start of today's discussion, one of my conservative colleagues made a question to you about a potential conflict here, and you flat out said there was no potential conflict. And now you're saying that you obviously knew of the potential conflict and filed paperwork to that degree.
No, we didn't expect a conflict to happen at all, because of the level of position that I went in with D&D. It's a very low level position. And so there was no conflict awareness at all. We were just putting in the safeguards to make sure that if there ever was in the future, they'd be in place.
Thank
Is
you.
that your perspective?
Thank you very much. I'm afraid
Sorry,
that is your
thank you.
time, Mr. Diggs, but you'll get another round. Turning now to Mr. Barrett. Mr. Barrett, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Do you have any companies or interests in companies outside of Canada?
No, sir.
No offshore holdings?
No.
Are any of your former colleagues at D&D double dipping?
I'm not sure I don't know if I know what that means, but I am not aware of any double dipping going on.
It's what you do. It's working for the federal government as a public servant, but also as a contractor concurrently.
Well, I would assume that there are lots of people in the public service that have companies outside of the public service, yes.
That do
But
work
I'm not aware of
for
any.
the government of Canada. You think that that's quite common?
I think it's fairly common, yes.
And what do you base that on? Just your personal experience or conversations with other public servants?
I would say that it's just my own, my own perception. I've been around the department forever, and everybody has their day-to-day work, and maybe they have a little side gig at night doing something else.
For the same department that they work for?
Oh, probably not. No, if you're talking about that, yeah, no.
You talked about how you took this job to drive projects. What did you say your position was within the public service?
So I am a tactical security specialist that's certified in high assurance capabilities that go into the Canadian Army at the very pointy end of the stick in combat vehicles, on soldiers. I'm a soldier myself.
Not the technology, sir. I'm asking about what level you were at in the public service.
Oh, sorry, an IT3.
Okay, so were you leading change as an IT3? Is that pretty common for IT3s to be leading departmental and organizational change?
Well, I certainly wouldn't put it up that high. As a team lead, that is the correct statement, is a team lead as an IT3, and you're in charge of a number of projects. And in this case, from my side, it was a high assurance security project.
So you've said that the Auditor General's figure that she attributed to your companies is incorrect. Is that's fair?
This is what I've been read into, and my staff tells me, yeah.
What you've been read. Did you read the Auditor General's report?
Absolutely.
Okay.
All of it.
So
I've got lots of comments.
Well, that's great. So by read into, you mean you read it?
Yep.
Okay.
100%.
So you read it and determined that the Auditor General, who is by definition a general with an army of auditors, that should be easy for you to understand based on your experience, that the whole army of auditors was wrong and this one-man army was right. But you've offered a series of assertions in your committee appearances that aren't true, and those have been highlighted by members of other parties and my colleagues. Even just today, you said that you're a member of the Conservative Party, and that's not true. You haven't been a member of the Conservative Party since 2021, and so that's
okay. That's
okay. That's fine.
Order.
That's fine.
Order.
That's
Order.
fine.
Order.
We know how
just
to.
1 second.
We know how to.
Just 1 second. I'm going to stop the clock. That is a prop and it's not allowed. Second, that is a donor card and it's not a membership card. We all get them to try to get money. Mr. Barrett, you have a minute and a half.
So it's a donor card. So
okay.
what you're offering is, again, not an honest representation of what you're doing. And I know you thought it was going to be a great gotcha moment, but it demonstrated that you're not being truthful, sir. And so when it comes down to you not knowing the difference between being a member of a party and whether or not you've made a donation to a party, should we really trust your assessment on whether or not the Auditor General of Canada is wrong in the amount of business that you have done with the government of Canada? I'm inclined to trust the Auditor General, just like I know that I can trust membership services, that they knew that whatever it was that you were going to hold up wasn't going to be what you said it was. So, while your misrepresentations vary, that's just another great example that we can't trust what you've said to be true, and it gives rise to more questions than it does answers. I'll cede my time back to the chair.
Thank you very much. Turning now to Mr. Jauhari, you have thank you for joining us today, Mr. Jauhari. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's good to be here once again. And Mr. Yeo, I'd like to go back to the ArriveCan. Can you kindly tell me how did the contract for ArriveCan came to Dalian?
My understanding, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the question. My understanding is that we never had an ArriveCan contract, but this was all through staff augmentation contracts that were competitively awarded to Dalian on behalf of CBSA. So okay. My understanding is that it was staff aug contracts. Yeah.
Okay. So the staff augmentation contract that was awarded to Dalian on CBSA, how did that come about?
So again, I'm buried 2 gates deep at D&D, and I don't have the exact aspects of how that actually transpired, but I could ask our staff. and
Yeah,
bring back
I would
to you.
appreciate if you could provide that to the committee.
Sure.
Sir, you've indicated that the amount of the contract was 4.9 million. The amount of staff augmentation was 4.9 million over 2 years for 20 employees at 100 hours, and you call that a part-time, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so if my math holds, and at 1.6 divided by 20 divided by 100, you are charging about $815 an hour, whereas GC strategy for ArriveCan was charging in the 1,200 plus. Can you explain why? Because if you're, can you tell me what is it that your team and that 20-man team was, 20-person team was doing for CBSA?
Sure. So I'm not sure exactly of their specific tasks because of the fact that this goes into staff augmentation, whether it's the people that went into it was software development, testers, project management, technology architecture, cybersecurity. So once they get over to the CBSA through the staff augmentation contract, it's really up to the technical authority to drive whatever business needs that are happening on that side. But to get to your question about 20 people on the contract, my understanding and what my staff has provided me is that the bill rates ranged from $540 to $1,000 per day, depending on the service.
Okay, which is pretty much aligned with what Auditor General was talking about as was rate, but that's very different than the rate that GC strategy was charging. Were you dealing directly with CBSA? Sorry, was Dalian dealing directly with CBSA or was through another organization or?
Yep, my understanding is that Dalian was the prime contractor for these contracts. So yes, we were dealing directly with CBSA. Yep.
Okay. Can you tell me of the 20 employees that worked on that project, how many of them were Indigenous?
There are 20 IT professional consultants, not employees, but I would have to check with our staff to see if any of them are actually Indigenous.
Okay. Can you tell me of the projects that you have worked with the Government of Canada, how many of them have been, whether as a subcontractor, whether as your employee, how many of them have been Indigenous?
I know there's a number. I know there's a number out there.
Would you know 5, would 10, 20, 50?
This is the challenge we have with Indigenous, our Indigenous culture, right? Is that we don't have enough trained technical people coming out of the Indigenous side of things. So
how much investment has
number.
your company made into training Indigenous people?
So from a training perspective, I would say that we have had experiences with Algonquin College in the past, where I've given out an Aboriginal Achievement Award to technical people that have passed the bar at Algonquin, and I've brought them in for a 12-week placement at the company, and then they've either stayed or they
Would it
moved
be
along.
fair to say
yeah.
that because of your claim of Indigenous status, you're very comfortable taking under the procurement allocation or under set-aside contract, yet your investment, the company of Dalian, into either hiring or training and building capacity within that Indigenous group is non-existent?
See, the PSIB and the PSAB at the time is not in there. It's not in the spirit of actually that aspect. It's in the spirit of trying to get access to government contracts and being able to compete against bigger companies. So absolutely, we've done what we've done in the past with Algonquin and tried to hire Indigenous people, which we have internal staff and also contractors. But I just don't have the current number of how many Indigenous contractors we have today.
Can you kindly provide that? And thank you, Mr. Chair.
We can, for sure.
Thank you. I
Absolutely.
just wanted to appreciate that, Mr. Howie, and good. We'll look for that response as well, Mr. Yao. Being now our fourth and last round, Mr. Brock, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I want to pursue this line of misrepresentations, Mr. Yo. I know Mr. Barrett asked you some questions and other members have asked you questions, which in my opinion really challenge your credibility. Now, both you and the owner of Corodex, Mr. Wood, testified on October 31st 2023, and both of you were quite emphatic that both businesses are regularly audited by Indigenous Services Canada with respect to the procurement strategy for Indigenous businesses, and you both have been receiving clean audits. But that was a misrepresentation. It was a lie, because Indigenous Services Canada said all they do with respect to the set-asides that both your companies operate under from time to time is they do pre-audits. They don't do post-audits. You agree with that assessment from Indigenous Services Canada?
I would absolutely agree with that. Yes,
right.
For sure.
But you didn't qualify that to the membership. You didn't qualify that to committee.
Well, it's your policy. I mean, like I understand that we go through audits, but I think that's a normal course of action for ISC in its entirety.
Well, I think it's a pretty big deal, sir, when you lead the committee to believe that you're running a clean business, that your Indigenous set-asides are legitimate. They're not operating under a phantom scheme. I know you've been heavily criticized by a number of Indigenous organizations that you're running this. In fact, Bottler even made the same allegation. So these are real concerns. And I think you have to be honest with committee members, sir, because although you haven't been sworn to tell the truth, there is a presumption that you will tell the truth at committee. And there are consequences when people do not tell the truth at committee. So we're going to find out ultimately by the end of this summer through Indigenous Services Canada, who's going to audit everything that you have done, as well as Coridex, hopefully for the last 8 years, if not longer, with respect to all the Indigenous set-asides. Because I think Canadians deserve to know whether or not Indigenous Canadians have benefited from this particular government operation. And if they haven't, then, sir, you'll have some questions to answer. So I put that out to you, sir. Now, the other aspect that concerns me is your relationship with the GC Strategies. Is it accurate, sir, that the one and only time that you worked with GC Strategies was on the Bottler task authorization?
That I would have to ask our staff. I'm not exactly sure if there was anything else in relation to working with GC Strategies. So I'd have to ask our staff about that.
Well, let's talk about Bottler for a moment, please. You do know that Christian Firth testified from GC Strategies that not on one occasion, but upwards to 5 occasions, he deliberately and intentionally doctored work experience for both of the Bottler partners. And he claimed it was a mistake. But given my former background as a Crown attorney, all accused persons, all criminals claim they made mistakes. What in fact Mr. Firth did was commit forgery, and it was a fraud on the government. And what concerns me, sir, is that the Globe recently reported that both your company, Dalian and Coridex, received those doctored resumes, those fraudulent, forged resumes, and you, in fact, forwarded that on to the government. That was recent news to me and perhaps this committee, because we were all led to believe that it was Christian Firth at GC who delivered that directly to the government. So it really begs the question, sir, if you've only had a limited amount of time with GC Strategies, why would you accept their material at face value? Because now you're implicated as a joint venture, as a party to the offense of fraud and forgery. It's no wonder that the RCMP are currently investigating your company and that of Coridex. And notwithstanding that you haven't been contacted, certainly does not make yourself in the clear. So you talked about quality management systems in place. Why didn't the quality management system catch these fraudulent resumes?
Yeah, for sure. So it's a good question. So, first and foremost, we're as dismayed as the rest of the committee on the findings from GC Strategies. We were definitely not aware of what was going on, below our subcontractor. The contract between us and GC Strategies is exactly that. We have no reference to Bottler in this case, and what information is being provided, by GC Strategies to us. There are aspects that, and I will be honest with you, there's aspects of third-party verification on employment and that sort of thing, but it's not an industry standard. It's not an industry standard that everybody does in the entire, professional services market. So, what we've learned from this is that even though we do our due diligence on security clearances and putting the CVs together and the categories and the grids and staffing that up to CVSA, what we have learned is that we likely need to put a third-party, verification of employment in place that would allow us to smoke this kind of stuff out. And we just weren't aware of it.
Thank you. That is the time. Turning out to
Thank you,
Mr.
Chair.
Chen, you have the floor. Mr. Chen for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Yo, you've had a long career. You joined the Canadian Armed Forces in 1987. You became a reservist in 2001 until 2016. You were hired, as we've heard today, by National Defense in 2023. Earlier today in your testimony, you said that it was fairly common, quote unquote, that many government employees have a company on the side. You said that that was your own perception. Could you elaborate what informed your perception that many government employees run side hustle businesses on the side?
Well, I can tell you this, that Canada and our taxation system and everything being so expensive with inflation and everything else, whether you're a government employee or whether you're someone else not working with the government, there's likely a chance that you might have something else on the side to help pay the bills and put groceries on your table. So my perception is I'm an entrepreneur. I try and start things all the time, and I'm looking for multiple sources of income. And I'm sure that many Canadians are in the same boat, whether they're working for the government or not.
With all due respect, sir, that was not my question. You said earlier that your perception, your own perception, is that many government employees have corporations on the side. My question to you is, what informed your perception that other, not yourself, but other government employees, and in fact, many of them, as you stated, have corporations on the side?
I'm not, again, this is my own perception, and whether they have corporations or whether they have, things after hours, it's their own business. But I can tell you that from my perspective, I'm out doing what I need to do for the government during the day, but then I'm an entrepreneur at night and trying to do other things. So I can't imagine others aren't similar.
You talked earlier about how you got into securing government contracts. In fact, you said you go after them. And I want to hear from you, Mr. Yo, how easy has it been or difficult has it been for you to secure government contracts? Would you consider yourself successful in being able to secure government contracts for work through your company?
Dalian has really been in my opinion anyways, Dalian has been a very good success story. Up until recently, with all of this hype about me being an employee prior to the ArriveCan days and during ArriveCan. But yeah, understanding how, and this is what PSAB actually does for us, is that it allows us to be able to be a part of the solution with the government as far as Indigenous companies are concerned, and learn about how to interact with the government through contracting, through procurement, through staffing, and all of the other aspects that go along with that. So absolutely. Yep.
You understand, as an employee or former employee of National Defense, and as somebody who has many interactions with, has had many interactions with government over the years, that public servants play a fundamental role in serving this country, that their conduct is carefully watched, and that it's important to uphold public trust, because Canadians put their faith in the government to deliver programs and services, and that includes the people that are hired within that public service to act in the most transparent, accountable, and ethical ways. Would you say that it can be seen as a perceived conflict of interest when you have been able to be so successful, yet I hear a very different narrative on the ground from people who are everyday Canadians unable to access government contracts, companies that are doing good work, innovative work, that have told me that they're unable to even crack the door open. Do you find that there is a perception that there is something that is allowing you to have access that other people cannot, and the fact that you have said today that it's common for people in working in the public service to have corporations as you have, that the narrative that I hear from everyday people in my riding is that they can barely get home in time, going through traffic, working 10 hours a day to then be able to prepare a meal for their family, that the last thing on their mind is to set up a corporation and have a side hustle where they can make more money and be able to afford the things that they need to. I'd like to hear your comments on that, Mr. Yo.
Yep. No, I appreciate the backdrop. You know, it's been difficult. I mean, there is no easy button when it comes to working with the government. Many corporations die on the vine because of the fact that they just can't handle the actual process for actually winning contracts. You know, I agree with you on the fact that they, you know, the Canadians are struggling, and some of the people don't understand how to actually process, you know, successful, you know, contracting mechanisms. But in the end, it's very competitive. It's super competitive, and our hardware and software business has shown that in the last 5 or 6 years, where we have put in multiple RFPs and not won them. But certainly, you know, learning the process, whether it's under PSAB or whether it's under a different non-Indigenous side, and how to interact with the government is very long, very arduous, and extremely complicated.
Earlier, you mentioned your billionaire.
I'm afraid that's the time, Mr. Chen. We've gone well over. I know your side does have another spot left, and I know you have more questions. So I will move on to Madame Sinclair Desgagnés. Vous avez la parole pour 2 minutes 30 secondes, s'il vous plaît.
You have the floor for 2.5 minutes, Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés. Mr. Yo, how long have you known or have you been working closely with Mr. Wood from Coredex?
Colin was, he came into Karadix a number of years ago. But again, you know, I've been working at D&D 2 gates deep for a long time, and have not exactly a lot of interaction.
Mais vous avez mentionné tout à l'heure que Coradix.
But you mentioned Coradix and Dalian and how they work with shared services and have been doing so for several years. So how long have Dalian and Coradix been working so closely?
Oh, since the beginning. Since the beginning. I mean, I came to them in 2002 with my first contract.
Vous ne connaissiez pas Monsieur Wood avant.
And you didn't know Mr. Wood before he joined Coradix?
No, I did not.
Savez-vous que.
Do you know that just before coming to Coradix, Mr. Wood worked at Veritech, which on 23rd of February 2009 was found guilty of falsifying supply. They were rigging a bid. Were you aware of that? So Mr. Wood would have hidden the fact that for his former company that he worked for just before Coradix was doing the same maneuvers that that strangely enough, Dalian and Coradix are being accused of today in terms of rigging, and GC strategies in terms of rigging bids. And shortly after 2015, there were other accusations about Mr. Wood, and he left that company and came to Coradix and has been working closely with Dalian. Do you see any link between the potential allegations of bid rigging, which were revealed by the Auditor General's report, and those already done by a firm regarding a firm that Mr. Wood was a sales director of at the time?
Yep. No, I can only attest to what I know, and that is I've known Colin since he came to Karadix. I was not aware of his previous employment.
D'accord. Considérez-vous encore travailler?
Are you still considering working with Mr. Wood now that you know that he had him, or not him directly, but the company he was working for, that he was sales director for, was found guilty of bid rigging?
Yeah, it's always a conversation. It'll always be a conversation. So yes, I'll have
Donc,
a
c'est normal pour
conversation with
vous?
Colin.
So that's to be expected for you? That's normal?
No, it's not normal. Of course not.
Ça va? Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
You have the floor for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I do want to return to the comments you made in relation to one of my colleagues' questions on the doctored resumes. And so the doctored resumes, what do you know about these resumes?
Not much, to be honest with you. I mean, in the end, you know, if you talk about these, what happened between Bottler and GC, they could put anything on there as far as their experience is concerned. And when it goes, our relationship is with GC and with the Crown, obviously with CBSA, as our subcontractor.
So how involved were you in the review of Bottler's resumes?
Me personally, zero. I was at D&D, 2 Gates.
What about your company?
My company, obviously, I mean, it was a JV, right? So we obviously had interaction with GC Strategies in performing the task authorization requirements. Yeah.
And so did GC Strategies speak to you as to their use of the company, Bottler?
I'd have to check with our staff and ask them that. I'm not aware of. Obviously, they had to have some interaction, you know, between the task authorization request and our relationship with GC, but I'm not aware of the details of what they discussed as far as Bottler is concerned.
So these forged resumes that gave preferential access and eventually the awarding of the bid is tremendously disingenuous and is certainly defrauding Canadians. And so I want you to know how serious this issue is and to understand that providing any assistance from your company to the forgery of documents is illegal. Do you understand that?
Absolutely. And that's why we're just as dismayed as everybody else as to why and how we could have got this information wrong.
Whose letterhead were these resumes on?
So I would expect that our relationship as the prime to CBSA, we would have staffed up the package for the task authorization to them as part of the requirements package. So it would have gone on Dalian letterhead, but I'm not sure exactly what the interaction or documents or letterhead was.
So you're misrepresenting facts, Mr. Yossi. That's completely disingenuous to then say your company never had any access to a Bottler. Your only relationship was with GC Strategies, and then you just now confirm that the resumes that were forged were in your company's letterhead. Is that true?
So again,
can you repeat that? No, Mr. Yo, is what you just said true? Are the forged resumes on your company letterhead?
I can give you the process. I have never.
No, Mr. Yo, can you please answer yes or no to the fact you just submitted?
Well, I tell you this. I understand what the process would be because I understand task authorizations, but I have not seen any of the paperwork.
So you just submitted. You just admitted that you've not seen the paperwork, but you just said you know that the letterhead is on Dalian or the forged documents are on Dalian letterhead.
I can assume that obviously us as the prime and us giving, you know, CBSA this documentation as a part of the task authorization, likely it would go on Dalian letterhead.
Mr. Yo, this has been extremely disappointing to see this level of misrepresentation.
Your time, Mr. Desjardins. Turning now to Mr. Genuous, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Yo, your company has 2 people. Is your partner Indigenous?
He is.
He is, okay. You got $7.9 million on ArriveCan alone, even though, as you've testified, you didn't do any actual work on the app. How many Indigenous Canadians, besides you 2, benefited from that big fat check that the government wrote to Dalian for ArriveCan?
So our interpretation is that it's 4.9 million. But the aspect
so your interpretation is that you know better than the Auditor General?
I'm just telling you the facts that from our side. And we actually went out to the.
I think that's absurd, sir. But I want to actually focus on the Indigenous procurement component of it. Sure. How many Indigenous people besides you and your partner?
The clock, Mr. Johnson. I will just remind everyone because this has come up time and time again. The auditor's terms do not allow her to go into companies like the one before us, the Dalian. So that you sent her documents from her perspective could have been irrelevant. You'll all recall that the auditor noted she came up with these numbers based on what the government of Canada provided her. So just that's just a point of clarification for the committee. It doesn't change any of your questions, Mr. Janice. I just wanted to kind of put that out there, that this is an ongoing debate about the scope of ArriveCan, and I think it is an important one. So we don't know what the answer is. That's why these committee meetings are happening. Ms. Janice, you have the floor for 4.5 minutes.
Mr. Yeo, besides the 2 people at your company, how many Indigenous people benefited from the $7.9 million that the government of Canada gave you for the work you did on ArriveCan?
So in reference to the 7.9 million, which is actually 4.9, our actual representation of profit in that helps not only pay our staff, but also helps with our staff augmentation with Caratics as well.
How many Indigenous people? So you're not answering my question. You keep talking about your staff, but there's 2 of you. So okay, there are 2 Indigenous people who benefited, you and your partner.
Yeah.
But how many other Indigenous people benefited from this particular outlay from the government of Canada?
Well, I mean, we do work with the Algonquin College on staffing bursaries and things like that. I do have outreach back to my own, reserve in Alderville. But as far as, benefiting,
what does that even mean, though? Like you have reached back. So when you make a lot of money, I don't know. Like how do Indigenous Canadians benefit from you getting this deal?
Sure. The PSAB process and the PSAB policy, that's a government policy that we favor because it's a great policy. It's not.
I'm sure you think it's a great policy. Sorry,
it's not made to help Indigenous communities across the country. It's made to help the entrepreneur that's trying to get government contracts to grow his business. So,
okay,
in that context, it's not made for helping out Indigenous communities across the country.
Okay, so you just said that the government's Indigenous procurement policy, in your view, is not made to benefit Indigenous communities across the country. It's made to benefit the particular entrepreneur.
It's made to help the entrepreneur get access to government contracting that would allow them to grow the company in whatever fashion they want.
So your position is the policy made you money, therefore it's achieving its objective, regardless of the impact on Indigenous communities across the country.
So that could be your interpretation, but it's not the reality. The reality is.
I was just repeating what you just said, though.
Well, no, you weren't repeating what I just said. But in the context of the PSAB, it's spread out across the entire country, and there's lots of people that are actually working within the framework of that.
No, but sir, that actually isn't what you said before. But to broaden this out, so from what I understand, you've gotten your company has received hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts from the Trudeau government since 2015. That is under the framework of a policy that I thought was intended to actually elevate the conditions that Indigenous peoples in this country are living in. And you're saying, well, no, it's good enough that process made me money. That would seem to go against what Canadians would expect of the policy, surely.
My understanding of the value that you put out was 91 million. I've got it in front of me from 2015 until now. But at the same time, you can look in the PSAB and the PSIB policy and nowhere will it.
Sorry, just because my time's about to run out, Chair, I'd like to move a motion that the committee write to INAN to recommend that they investigate abuses in the Indigenous procurement system. I think the need for this motion is self-evident from the testimony that we've received.
Any chance you sent that motion?
I did send it in advance. It's that the committee write to INAN to recommend that they investigate abuses in the Indigenous procurement system. Thank you.
Very good. Could you distribute that when ready? Done. Perfect. Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Just speaking to the motion, Mr. Chair, and a potential misrepresentation by Mr. Yeo about PSAB contracts. As a matter of fact, 33% of all contracts by PSAB must be completed by Indigenous service providers, including when work is subcontracted. And so, Mr. Yo, you've spoken a great deal of your experience in working with subcontracting and your expertise of being a contractor of this great magnitude that you can solve all the government's problems with these great general contracting, but you don't actually know the policy. 33%.
A point of clarification.
So I will vote.
We've now moved into debate on the motion. The witness is not to enter debate on this. This is for members to consider the motion. So you can ask rhetorical questions, but the witness will not be engaged in any of this discussion. And I see your hand. Is that a point of order or to speak?
I was going to finish that. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Which leads me to believe that including the motion made by our colleague to refer this to INAN for further investigation, I also think that we should confirm by way of letter, Mr. Chair, to you as to the nature of the PSAB contract policy and refer that with the motion. It'll help them a great deal because they're not used to this kind of stuff, I don't think. But
sorry, are you proposing a suggestion to the chair or an amendment to the motion?
Not an amendment, a suggestion to the chair. If this motion passes.
Okay, let's cross one
Sure,
at a
we'll
time,
do it
but
one at a time.
I hear what you're saying. Ms. Shanahan.
I would like to speak to this motion, but I'd also like to have just 5 minutes so we can discuss it. Because again, and this goes to show that this is a committee that's working together. We find elements of this motion very interesting, but we'd like to discuss it with the members so we can come to something pretty.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
So
maybe
I will.
not
I will. I
necessarily
will
in front of
suspend
the-
for
yeah.
for 5 minutes maximum.
Mhm.
In the meantime, I'm going to try to get additional resources. Mr. Chair, I'm going to have to ask you just to kind of hold firm for a little while longer because we might come back to you for some questions for just one last member. So yes, I'll suspend for 5. Call our session back into order. Ms. Shanahan, I believe you were first on the speaking list on the motion that is before us.
Thank you, Chair, for giving us that 5 minutes to speak with all colleagues, because yeah, I think it's pretty clear that the testimony that we've heard today is leading us all in this direction to have this request for further investigation by INAN. So I think the wording of the motion is satisfactory to us, but I don't know if my colleague has something that he wanted to add.
So, I have no other speakers. So, Mr. Desjardins, I see your hand.
Just to Ms. Shanahan's point and to your point, Mr. Chair, it's actually in relation to the content of the letter that's contained within the motion. So I'm not sure if you want to hear my advice on that now or after the vote. But I do believe that the letter that is sent to INAN should include the PSAP policy. That is, so they understand that this is our concern, that there's a significant breach of what is the policy.
Here, my preference is, by coincidence, we have a subcommittee meeting on Thursday. Let's bring it up then. We can probably maybe get some language drafted by the research before then we can look at it. And I will certainly incorporate the views of all members, given that I hope this is going to be a unanimous motion. So anything else to discuss on this? Clerk, please call the vote, the roll call.
Shall the motion as moved by Mr. Jennings carry? Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Mr. Chen?
Yes.
Mr. Jawari?
Yes.
Ms. Shanahan?
Yes.
Ms. Yip?
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
Yes.
Mr. Jennings?
Yes.
Mr. Vierson?
Yes.
Madame Saint-Claude de Gagny? Mr. Desjardins?
Yes.
10 yeas.
Thank you very much. That concludes that bit of business. I'm going to go back to just finishing up with our questionnaires. Mr. Yayubi, I'm going to call you back up for your presence. Ms. Yip, you have the last round of 5 minutes. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll be sharing my time with Ms. Shanahan. Mr. Yo, you said repeatedly that D&D said there was no conflict. And you keep talking about this document. Can you provide a copy to the committee?
So I did see in the papers that D&D did make a statement indicating that there was no conflict, and it's a protected B document, but I have no issues with supplying you with anything.
Okay. Do you think there was anything wrong with the Auditor General's report on ArriveCan?
So it's a good report, but they have trouble putting this together because of the exact nature of how contracting works with TBIPs and SBIPs and professional services. They're all staff augmentation contracts. There potentially could be direct contracts for ArriveCan only. So they have a challenge against them to try and decipher all of this data. And so, even though we instituted an email back to the Auditor General on the 30th of January, indicating this, 4.9 versus 7.9 that was attributed to ArriveCan, they themselves even have attributed to, on page 5, 1.21, they've indicated that CBSA has expressed concerns that 12.2 million of the 59 million estimate could be unrelated to ArriveCan. So, I mean, it's a challenging report and it's a challenging effort to put it together.
Okay. Your time in Afghanistan, how long were you there?
I was there for 4 months.
And what was your role there?
I was delivering a high assurance security capability to Kandahar and to all of the forward operating bases out in Afghanistan.
Can you just tell me what that means?
Basically, our effort was to ensure that all of the pieces and parts were in place, so all of our coalition members knew exactly where our friendly forces were, and a couple of other capabilities.
Thank you, and over to you, Ms. Shanahan.
Thank you very much. So just a few more questions, Mr. Yo, to clarify who you are and your background and so on. So how long have you been a member of the Conservative Party?
Well, I've been a member for my entire life. I've been always voting, progressive conservative. And at the same time, I believe that my last membership back in after my very short stint with the PPC party, and I came back to the party is for 5 years.
Oh, and you did show a card at some point. Can you just show that up for the
No,
hold that up to the camera,
no,
or
that is a
perhaps
prop.
table it to
Miss Shanahan.
table
Hold on,
as a
Miss Shanahan.
document?
That is a prop, as the clerk is reminding me,
Okay.
and not permitted. So
Yeah, as a document to table it with this committee,
You're
that would be
welcome to
greatly
send it in.
appreciated, because it does seem that there's some confusion between whether it's a membership card
Point of
or
order,
donation.
Mr. Chair.
yes, Mr.
It's quite evident that Mr. Yo does not have a conservative membership
Okay.
card. Therefore, I have no objection to tabling.
Thank you. All right.
Excellent.
you have 2
You
minutes.
see how well we work together, Chair. This is so much appreciated. Can you tell us, as you are a donor, just roughly how much money have you donated to the Conservative Party?
Oh, I'm not sure if I can disclose that, but it's not great numbers, that's for sure.
All right. And just for the sake of parity, have you ever been a member of the Liberal Party of Canada?
I have not.
Well, there you go. Thank you very much.
That's it.
Maybe this
That's
is in
it.
my future. Who knows?
Liberal
Yeah.
insider.
Oh, I should ask maybe one last question. So the People's Party of Canada, you said you're no longer a member. So can you just give us the duration there of how long you were a member of that party?
Is there overlap here too? Or
Maybe 5 months from start to finish. Because originally I was actually in line to be the PC party candidate for Ottawa West Nepean. So I was actually in line to be with the PC party, which I should have stayed with them. But I moved over to the PPC party after Mr. O'Toole's kind of policies came out.
Well, yeah. So I think that concludes my questions, Chair.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Yao. You are excused. I appreciate you coming before us today. And to everyone else here on committee, we'll see you Thursday. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, that's right.